There is a ghost that lives inside of you. It's not a spirit or a phantom, but a memory. The memory of a mistake you made years ago. It visits you in the quiet moments, in the shower, during a long drive, or in the dead of night. It plays the same scene over and over and always asks the same question. What if? I am a cognitive narrator, and my purpose is to explore the architecture of our inner worlds, to understand why our minds build these prisons of the past, and to find the key that might unlock the door. If you've ever found yourself replaying an embarrassing moment, a failed relationship, a career misstep, or a word you wish you could take back, you already know the weight of this haunting. The memory doesn't just visit, it demands your attention. It insists that you examine it again and again as if doing so might change what happened. But of course it never does. This is rumination, the cognitive loop that replays past mistakes with relentless precision. It is not a personal failing or a sign of weakness. It is a common feature of the human mind, one that affects nearly all of us at some point in our lives. Rumination is the mind's attempt to solve a problem that cannot be solved, to finish a task that was never truly begun. It is the psychological equivalent of pressing replay on a scene you can never edit. The experience is so painful and persistent because it touches something fundamental about our identity. The mistake we made becomes woven into the story we tell about ourselves. It becomes a defining chapter, one that we read over and over each time with growing regret and self-criticism. We judge ourselves harshly for what we did or didn't do, and we imagine alternate versions of our lives where things turned out differently. But here is the paradox. The memory that haunts you is not the memory of the event itself. It is a reconstruction, a story you've been telling yourself in the present. And as we'll discover, this story may not even be true. Pause. The version of your mistake that lives in your mind today has been shaped, altered, and sculpted by years of emotion, new information, and cognitive bias. We believe we are haunted by the past, but what if we are actually haunted by a story we are telling ourselves in the present? Let me tell you about a moment from my own past, or at least what I remember of it. I was in my 20s, standing in front of a room full of colleagues, presenting an idea I had worked on for weeks. Midway through, I stumbled over my words, forgot a key point, and saw someone in the front row stifle a laugh. I left that room convinced I had humiliated myself, that everyone thought I was incompetent. For years, that memory returned to me, vivid and painful, a monument to my failure. But here's the thing. I recently spoke to someone who was in that room, and they didn't remember my stumble at all. They remembered the idea, not the presentation. The version of that event I have been carrying all these years, the one that felt so real, so certain, was largely a fiction. This is the first truth we must confront. Memory is not a recording. It is not a video file stored in the brain, ready to be played back with perfect accuracy. Memory is a reconstructive process. Every time we remember something, we are not accessing the original event. We are rebuilding it from scattered fragments, piecing it together like a puzzle with some of the pieces missing. And in that reconstruction, errors creep in. Neuroscience has shown us that memories are stored as distributed patterns of neural activity across different regions of the brain. The sight of a face, the sound of a voice, the feeling of embarrassment, all of these elements are encoded separately and then reassembled during recall. This process makes memory incredibly flexible and adaptive, but it also makes it vulnerable to change. Each time we retrieve a memory, we are rewriting it. And in that rewriting, the memory can be altered by our current emotions, beliefs, and knowledge. And consider a classic experiment by psychologist Elizabeth Loftus, one of the pioneers in the study of memory distortion. In her research, participants watched a video of a car accident. Later, some were asked, how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other? While others were asked, how fast were the cars going when they hit each other? The word smashed led participants to estimate higher speeds and even to falsely remember seeing broken glass that wasn't there. The language used after the event changed the memory of the event itself. This is the misinformation effect. It occurs when post-event information, things we learn, feel, or are told after the original event, contaminates and alters the original memory. In the case of your past mistake, think about how many times you've revisited that memory. How many times have you analyzed it, criticized yourself for it, discussed it with others, or imagined how it could have gone differently? Each of these acts is an opportunity for the memory to change. The person you were then is not the person you are now. You have more knowledge, more experience, and more self-awareness. But when you recall that mistake, you judge it with your current perspective. You project your present-day emotions and understanding backward in time, and this process distorts the original memory. The mistake that felt manageable or understandable at the time now seems unforgivable because you are looking at it through the lens of who you have become. Years of self-criticism, regret, and hindsight have transformed the memory of your mistake. What you remember today is not the objective truth of what happened. It is a composite, part fact, part emotional inference, and part outright fabrication. But the misinformation effect is only half the story. The brain doesn't just alter existing memories, it creates entirely new ones. In a well-known experiment called the Dees-Roediger-McDermott paradigm, participants are shown a list of related words: bed, rest, awake, tired, dream, wake, snooze, blanket. Then they are asked to recall the words. A striking number confidently remember seeing the word sleep, even though it was never on the list. Their brains, recognizing the pattern, filled in the blank with a word that fit the theme. This is not a failure of intelligence or attention. It is the brain doing what it was designed to do, making sense of incomplete information by filling in the gaps. But in doing so, it creates memories of things that never happened. Your brain has filled in details, added emotional color, and reconstructed the event in ways that make it feel more significant or more shameful than it actually was. The memory that haunts you is not a faithful recording of the past. It is a ghost, a reconstruction, a story that has been altered and amplified over time. And recognizing this is the first step towards setting yourself free. Even if we accept that memory has been distorted, the question remains: why does it hurt so much? Why does it return to us with such force, demanding our attention, refusing to be silenced? The answer lies in counterfactual thinking, the mind's ability to imagine alternative versions of the past, to ask, what if? This is a powerful cognitive tool that allows us to learn from mistakes and plan for future success. But it also has a dark side. When we engage in upward counterfactual thinking, imagining how things could have been better, we create an idealized version of our lives where we made the right choice, said the right thing, or acted with perfect wisdom. We mourn the loss of this imagined future as if it were real, though it never existed. The pain we feel is the emotional response to the gap between what happened and what we believe could have happened. Imagine a woman who, 20 years ago, turned down a job in another city to stay close to family. Now, in moments of dissatisfaction, she imagines the life she could have lived, filled with adventure, success, and fulfillment. She mourns this fantasy as if it were stolen from her, using it as a weapon of self-blame. If only I had been braver. If only I had been smarter. This brings us to the Zeigarnik effect, the mind's tendency to remember unfinished or interrupted tasks better than completed ones. Your past mistake functions as unfinished business, a problem that was never fully resolved. And so the mind keeps returning to it, replaying the scene, searching for closure it can never find. The mistake is in the past, fixed and unchangeable, but the mind treats it as if it were a task that still needs to be completed. This is why the thoughts are so intrusive, so persistent. This cognitive burden creates mental tension, unresolved dissonance that keeps the memory at the forefront of your consciousness. The mistake becomes a cognitive itch you cannot stop scratching, and each time you revisit it, you reinforce its presence in your mind, making it stronger, more vivid, more painful. But there is another layer to this process, one that is even more insidious. It is the way we allow our present-day emotions and knowledge to distort our judgment of the past. This is where emotional reasoning and hindsight bias come into play. Emotional reasoning is a cognitive distortion in which we use our feelings as evidence of truth. We think, I feel guilty, therefore I must have done something terrible. Or, I feel ashamed, therefore I am a bad person. Our emotions become the lens through which we interpret reality, and we mistake the intensity of our feelings for the accuracy of our beliefs. If you feel overwhelming regret about your past mistake, emotional reasoning tells you that the mistake must have been as bad as you feel it was. The emotion becomes the proof. But emotions are not facts. They are responses, shaped by our thoughts, our biases, and our current state of mind. The guilt you feel today does not necessarily reflect the severity of what you did in the past. It reflects how you have come to think about it over time. Hindsight bias compounds this distortion. This is the tendency to believe, after an event has occurred, that we should have been able to predict it, that the outcome was obvious all along. We say to ourselves, I should have known better. But this judgment is unfair. At the time of the event, you did not have the knowledge you have now. You were operating with limited information, different pressures, and a different version of yourself. Hindsight bias causes us to project our current knowledge backward in time, creating the illusion that the correct choice was clear and that we were foolish for not seeing it. But this is a distortion. The correct choice was not clear. The outcome was not inevitable. You were doing the best you could with the information and resources you had at the time. When we combine emotional reasoning with hindsight bias, we create an impossible standard for our past selves. We judge the person we were with the wisdom we now possess, and we find them lacking. We criticize them for not knowing what they could not have known, for not being who they had not yet become. This is not fair. It is a form of psychological cruelty, one that we inflict upon ourselves over and over each time we revisit the memory. The mistake you made has become, in your mind, evidence of your inadequacy, your foolishness, your unworthiness. But this is a story you are telling yourself, not a truth you are discovering. We have explored the cognitive mechanics of memory distortion and the emotional drivers of regret. Now we must ask, if the memory is not accurate, if the judgment is unfair, if the past is not as fixed as it seems, then what do we do with it? How do we free ourselves from the ghost that haunts us? The answer begins with a fundamental shift in perspective. We must recognize that we are not passive victims of our memories. We are the narrators of our own stories. And as narrators, we have the power to change our relationship to the past. This concept is narrative identity, the idea that our sense of self is constructed through the stories we tell about our lives. We are not simply collections of facts and events. We are the meaning we make from those facts and events. We take the scattered moments of our existence and weave them into a coherent narrative, one that gives us a sense of continuity, purpose, and identity. The mistake you made is not just an event in your past. It has become a chapter in your life story, one that you have read and reread so many times that you know it by heart. But here is the crucial insight. You are not just a reader of this story. You are also the editor. You have the power to change the way you interpret this chapter, to place it in a different context, to give it a different meaning. This does not mean erasing the mistake or pretending it didn't happen. It means changing your relationship to it. It means recognizing that the mistake is one chapter in a much larger story, a story that includes moments of courage, kindness, growth, and resilience. It means seeing the mistake not as a defining failure, but as a moment of learning, a stepping stone on a journey that is still unfolding. The key is not to erase the chapter, but to stop letting it define the entire book. You are more than the worst thing you have ever done. You are more than the mistake you cannot forget. You are a complex, evolving human being, and your story is still being written. But rewriting the story requires more than just a shift in perspective. It requires self-compassion, the ability to treat yourself with the same kindness, understanding, and patience that you would offer to a friend who was struggling. Self-compassion, as defined by psychologist Kristin Neff, has three core components. The first is self-kindness, which means being gentle with yourself when you make mistakes, rather than harshly criticizing yourself. It means recognizing that failure and imperfection are part of the human experience and that you deserve kindness, not condemnation. When you think about your past mistake, what do you say to yourself? If your inner voice is harsh, judgmental, and unforgiving, then you are engaging in self-criticism, not self-compassion. Imagine instead speaking to yourself the way you would speak to someone you love. What would you say to a friend who made the same mistake? You would likely offer understanding, context, and reassurance. You would remind them that everyone makes mistakes, that they did the best they could, and that one mistake does not define their worth. This is self-kindness. It is not about excusing bad behavior or avoiding responsibility. It is about responding to your own suffering with warmth and care rather than with cruelty and shame. The second component is common humanity, the recognition that suffering, failure, and imperfection are not unique to you. They are part of the shared human experience. Every person you have ever met has made mistakes. Every person has regrets. Every person has moments they wish they could take back. You are not alone in your struggle. When we ruminate on our mistakes, we often feel isolated, as if we are the only ones who have ever failed in this particular way. But this is an illusion. Your mistake connects you to the rest of humanity, not separates you from it. The third component is mindfulness, observing your thoughts and emotions without judgment, without suppressing them, and without exaggerating them. It means holding your pain with balanced, open awareness, neither denying it nor drowning in it. When the memory of your mistake arises, mindfulness invites you to notice it without immediately reacting. You can observe the thought, "I made a terrible mistake," without accepting it as absolute truth. You can notice the feeling of regret without letting it consume you. You can acknowledge the pain without letting it define your entire experience. Mindfulness creates space between the thought and your response to it. And in that space, you have the freedom to choose how you want to relate to the memory. You can choose self-compassion over self-criticism. You can choose understanding over judgment. Let me offer you a practical exercise. Close your eyes, if you feel comfortable, and bring the memory to mind. Notice the feelings that come with it, the guilt, the shame, the regret. Then place your hand on your heart and say, "This is a moment of suffering. Suffering is part of being human. May I be kind to myself in this moment. May I give myself the compassion I need." Repeat this as many times as you need. Let the words sink in. Let them replace the harsh judgments you have been carrying. This is not a magic spell that will erase the pain, but it is a practice that can soften it, that can create a gentler relationship between you and your past. Rewriting your story also means recognizing the context in which the mistake occurred. You were a different person then. You were navigating different circumstances, different pressures, different limitations. The person who made that mistake was doing the best they could with the resources they had at the time. Think about the context. What was happening in your life when you made that mistake? What were you struggling with? What did you not yet know? What pressures were you under? When you place the mistake back into its original context, it often becomes easier to see it not as a moral failing, but as a human moment, a moment of imperfection in a life that is, by definition, imperfect. The past is a place of reference, not a place of residence. Pause. The memory of your mistake is not a life sentence. It is a scar. And scars do not mean you are broken. They mean you have survived. Pause. They mean you have lived a life worth remembering, all of it. The mistakes, the regrets, the moments of shame, they are part of the tapestry of your life, woven alongside the moments of joy, courage, and growth. You cannot change what happened, but you can change how you hold it. You can change the story you tell about it. You can choose to see it not as a tragedy, but as a turning point, a lesson, a reminder of your humanity. You can choose to let it be part of your past without letting it control your present. The ghost that haunts you is not the past itself. It is the story you have been telling about the past. And that story can be rewritten, not by denying what happened, but by placing it in a larger, more compassionate narrative, one in which you are not defined by your worst moments, but by your capacity to learn, to grow, and to forgive yourself. This is the path forward, not through forgetting, but through remembering differently, not through erasing the past, but through integrating it into a richer, more complete understanding of who you are. You are not the mistake. You are the person who survived it, who learned from it, who carries it as part of a larger story that is still unfolding. The memory will still visit you from time to time, but when it does, you can greet it with compassion rather than fear. You can acknowledge it without letting it consume you. You can let it be a reminder, not of your failure, but of your resilience. If this exploration resonated with you, I invite you to subscribe to continue our journey into the mind. And I invite you to share one thing in the comments that this video helped you understand about your own story. Let's build a space of collective understanding together, because in sharing our stories, we remind each other that we are not alone, that suffering is universal, and that healing is possible.